Welcome to All the F Words,
a podcast where two writer friends, nearly 30 years apart, explore everything we give an F about. I'm Gabi Moskowitz.
And I'm Joanne Green. On each episode of All the F Words, we'll focus on a theme starting with the letter F. Things like fondling, flattery, and fatherhood.
We'll share stories from our lives and our distinct generational perspectives and look to the experts for insights and ideas.
Today we're going to talk about the proverbial fork in the road, how we make decisions when there's a clear choice of how to proceed.
I would think some of us have an easier time with forks in the road than others of us.
True, Gabi. And many deep thinkers have addressed this question. My personal favorite is from Yogi Berra, who used his famous adage as the title of his book. When you see a fork in the road, take it.
Let's start by talking about times in our lives when we've had a big decision to make. Can you share, Joanne?
Oh, there have been many. I mean, for all of us, I suspect at some point or another, we had to decide about whether to stay in a relationship or break up. So I had a few of those. Don't need to go into details unless you want me to. There was the big decision of whether to stay in Boston after I graduated from college or move to San Francisco. I moved to San Francisco, spoiler alert. But it was definitely a decision. A decision that was made easier by the fact that my car was stolen.
What happened?
So that was kind of crazy. I had my second 1972 white Super Beetle VW Bug. And the first one I got as a 21st birthday present from my parents. It was used and it was a stick shift. And I didn't know how to drive a stick shift, but I told them, yeah, no problem, I can do this. And I stalled my way out of the dealership parking lot and figured it out. That car was stolen from a parking lot where I worked, actually. I was working at a little wine and cheese cafe in Brookline called Papillon. And when I came out of work and went to the spot where my car had been, it wasn't.
Your car was stolen from a parking lot in Brookline?
Yeah, in broad daylight. Apparently, it's really easy to steal, or back in the day, it was really easy to steal Volkswagens. So this must have been a ring because I replaced it with another 1972 white Super Beetle, this time with automatic transmission, also used. And I probably spent under $1,000 on each of these cars. But in any case, 6 months later, I'm having lunch in Cambridge in Harvard Square and parked in a parking lot once again. And I come out to the parking lot and my car's not there.
Whoa.
It was like deja vu all over again. Crazy. But I decided that this was a sign. The universe was telling me I was being absolved of my material possessions so that there was no real compelling reason for me to stay in Boston. Not as though my car was a compelling reason, but it was like the final straw. I was teetering. I was on the fence. Do I move? Do I start my life? I had no real job prospects in either city. My only job prospects at that point were in Manhattan, in New York City, and I had gone there. My brother had hooked me up with some ad agencies, and I had gone there and decided that was not going to be my future. I didn't feel like I was going to be a New York City girl. So this happened, and I said, oh, that's it. I'm moving to San Francisco.
Whoa.
What about you? Forks in the road?
I've had a few forks in the road. I'm excited to dig into this, first of all, because I am not somebody who hesitates much when it comes to making decisions. I usually just make them and hope that it was a good one. I'm married to somebody who hems and haws to his detriment. And so making decisions together is an interesting process. But I had a similar fork in the road about literally living in Boston and deciding whether or not to move to San Francisco. And it was less of a moment where my literal or proverbial car was stolen and I knew what the next step was, and more of a gradual feeling like I wasn't where I wanted to be. It was usually for me, it's an awareness that I'm not in the right thing. I also was in a relationship in my mid 20s for a couple of years where he was fine, but he wasn't great. And my experience was pretty limited, and so I didn't know what was out there. But I'll tell you, the moment that changed everything was I was driving home by myself from work, I think, and I was at this intersection on Market Street by the Safeway on Market Street in the Castro area of San Francisco, because I'd already decided to move to San Francisco at my previous fork in the road. And this drunk, scary guy tried to get into my car. And it was really scary. And I started honking. I was at a red light and he was like trying to open my car door. And it was just really scary. And I was fine. I got away. But I called my boyfriend, my then boyfriend, and I was crying. And I said, I'm really freaked out. Could you please come over? And he wouldn't come. He was hanging out with some friends and he didn't want to leave. And that was when I just was like, all right, whatever this guy has to maybe offer me, I deserve a guy who'll come over when I'm scared. So I think I broke up with him the next week. But
epic
honestly,
fail on his part. Epic fail.
Yeah. Yes. He really screwed the pooch on that one. Yeah. But how are you with decisions, like with big decisions? How is the process of being at a fork in the road and having to make a big choice? What's that like for you?
Okay, I'm telling this to you with my husband, Fred, the producer of our podcast, listening, and he may disagree. So here's what I would say about that. Sometimes I'm instantly sure, and I know. I'm thinking about seeing something that I think is a solution to my problems, and I want it right away. The Nextel phone 100 years ago, when that phone came out and Fred showed it to me, I was like, yep, that's what I want. I've been that way about booking vacations. I've been that way about houses that we've purchased. But I'm also someone who second guesses my decisions after the fact, and that drives him crazy. Because once the decision is made, what's the point of going back and saying, well, what if this, what if that? And so there is that. And about less consequential decisions, I have a terrible time making them, which is weird that important decisions sometimes come much more easily to me, the same way that I can spend large amounts of money much more easily than I can decide to spend a small amount of money. It's a little counterintuitive, but I agonize over, for instance, whether I'm going to buy a particular shirt or not. The whole time we were in Japan, I was saying, I need to get an article of clothing that's from Japan, that really looks like it's from Japan. And I tried on this shirt that was great, fit well, good colors, easy to wash. There was no reason not to get it. And then I found out that the yen translated to $70. And I was like, oh, I don't need this shirt. I don't need this shirt. Why would I get this shirt? So that would be a sort of typical thing that I would turn into a bigger deal than it needs to be. P.S. I ended up getting the shirt, but that was with a lot of encouragement.
Well, there are amounts of money. It's interesting that you bring that up, because I wasn't thinking about that when it came to forks in the road. I am definitely someone who, I don't like being in indecision. Like, I'll tell you, Evan and my mother planned our entire wedding because it wasn't that I didn't care about the aesthetics of everything, but I hated the process of like choosing between fonts because I think because maybe it's because I didn't really care as much as they did, because at no point did a font like sing to me. At no point did I think, oh, that is the one that will make our wedding more perfect. I just was like, let's get something everyone's on board enough with and move forward, because I don't want to keep thinking about this anymore. But I have noticed in all all shopping situations, there are certain amounts of money that become where I become more conscious of the fact that I'm spending money. And like you, with really large purchases, I don't really have a problem. Like, I know the car that I want. If they don't have the color that I want, that's fine. As long as it's the right car, as long as it's safe, let's just be done with this, right? But like, for example, like with a coffee drink, right? I usually am just a cappuccino or black coffee, maybe with oat milk kind of person. But coffee drinks and smoothies are two things I've noticed that are really starting to climb the prices. And I ordered a smoothie at that mall in Corte Madera when I was killing time while one of my kids was at a camp a few months ago. And I didn't pay attention to what it costs when I was ordering because it's a smoothie. How expensive could it be? It was $14.
What?
And I had gotten far enough with the smoothie that I couldn't back out. It was just like a kale and fruit smoothie with some sort of non-dairy milk. It wasn't anything fancy about it, but it bothered me for the rest of the day that I spent $14 on something that was not even enough for a meal. Or things like, I'm a big fan of pastured eggs. I think pastured eggs are really important. I think it's better for the environment and better for the chickens and it's better for you. But like pastured eggs, that's another thing that's been creeping up. And I sometimes have
it's like $8 or $9 now.
Depending on where you buy them, they could be, $10 or $12. But it's like, standing in front of the egg case, choosing between eggs from chickens that I know didn't have a good life. It's the existential guilt that I wouldn't have felt if I weren't faced with. I mean, perhaps this is what I'm really talking about, is becoming a conscious consumer or trying to. But sometimes it's like,
well, there are a number of different things at play here. One of the things that you said, I want to just jump back to, when you were saying if the car doesn't come in your color, okay, you just want to be done with it. And I think that is where we need to spend a moment. Is indecision is uncomfortable. Being at the fork in the road, whether it's of an enormous decision like whether to quit your job when you don't have another one because you feel hopeful that something better will come along and this is just untenable, whether it's that kind of a fork in the road or a relationship or a move, or even whether it's, whether to spend the day in yours and my case writing when what you really feel like doing is going and seeing a friend. So it's uncomfortable, I think, to be on a teeter-totter, to be like, because you just, on the one hand, you want to be making a thoughtful decision. You want to weigh the pros and cons. You want to be a logical person. And on the other hand, there's this real temptation to just say, oh, who cares?
Yeah.
Oh, whatever. Let's just get on with it. And I will deal with the consequences of my decision, whatever that is. So why do you think it's so difficult, Gabi, to make decisions?
Like in general or for me?
Well, both. I don't think you're that different than most people, do you?
No. I think I like to think I am, but I think I'm probably not. I think that I think that making decisions like the kinds that a decision, especially one that's going to impact your future for some period of time, is much more anxiety provoking than certain other decisions. And so, because really what some of these decisions, the decision of buying a car or the decision of, anything you're going to commit to, is asking you to kind of predict your future for some period of time. And Evan's got a really hard time. He has a really hard time with it. And he calls it cutting off the tags. And I'll kid you not, I make fun of him all the time because that man will keep the tags on clothing If it's not visible, he will keep the tag on clothing for a really long time. And it was when our oldest daughter was born, and he had this like existential meltdown when it was time to cut the umbilical cord. Because it was like, cut the umbilical cord. Of course you have to cut the umbilical cord, but he kind of panicked because it was the ultimate tag, right? You know,
Right.
As soon as you cut that, this is no longer a parasite invading my belly. We have a kid now. And I think it's because
there's no going back.
There's no going back. And, even with, it's why getting married is a bigger deal than, even if your life is totally, and I say this as someone who is a real marriageist and likes being married. And I think there are people who would disagree with me, but, one of the things about marriage is you say, all right, you and me in front of God, the law, and everyone we know, we are going to make it really complicated and difficult and financially problematic to break up. So, and there's something about, and of course there's magical spiritual stuff about marriage too, but there's something about saying, let's lock this down and make it legal so that if we decide to back out, there's a lot that we have to go through to make that happen. And I think that decisions aren't necessarily like marriage, but they are in that when you're locked and loaded on a big decision, you suddenly before your eyes flash every single other option. And I think that for a lot of people, you're asked to you're asked to make a decision on behalf of your future self. And I think that is really anxiety provoking.
I think one of the things that makes people so anxious or have a difficult time making a decision is flat out the fear of being wrong, the fear of making a mistake, right? The fear of maybe going for that bright, shiny object without realizing the downside risks. And making decisions by its very nature involves risk.
Yeah.
Because when you make a choice, you're making a choice for something, but you're also making a choice against something. So when you talk about cutting off the tags, breaking up with someone, leaving a relationship, or quitting a job are definitely examples of that. Sometimes what we're doing is we're ending something when we don't know what we're choosing. We're choosing the unknown over the known because the known isn't working for us for whatever reason. Yeah. And so we're willing to take this big risk as to what will the other side of the fork take us to, right?
Yeah. It also, there are a lot of decisions that are actually made of a bunch of tiny decisions. Right. If I decide I'm going to commit to exercise, nothing changes in the moment. It's like every day, do I make the decision to exercise? And if I don't exercise one day, then that doesn't necessarily derail the whole decision. But then a decision like a breakup, leaving a job, moving somewhere, making a major capital purchase, getting rid of something, those are things where it's like you're hitting a button. And even if you go back on that decision, which, in many cases you can, it's big and complicated.
And there are consequences. We'll be back right after this break. With hard life decisions, I think it's not so much about whether we want to do the thing or not. It's about what else we could be doing. Anyone who hasn't heard about FOMO, fear of missing out, it is a thing. It is real. And I have it in spades, but I think part of that is because I was the baby of the family. So I watched my sister and brother always doing things that I couldn't do.
We haven't done that as an episode, have we? FOMO?
Oh, we will. Let's do it.
We should. Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's really like when you make one of those decisions, you can't help but ask, well, what would have happened if I had chosen the other fork, the other part of the fork?
So here's where we're different. I really rarely get FOMO. And I'm in a marriage. I'm in a mixed marriage when it comes to that, because Evan, as I'm sure will not come as a surprise based on what I've been saying, has terrible FOMO. And the thing that when we lived in San Francisco, we lived about a block from Dolores Park. And there was this thing that would happen on weekends that was such a great manifestation of our respective relationships with missing out on something. And it the way that we worked through it for me was a really good representation of kind of the development of our relationship. But so if you've ever been in the Mission District in San Francisco on a Saturday or Sunday and you walk by Dolores Park, at some point during the afternoon, you will hear a drum circle of some sort. And it's usually a crunchy bunch of hippies with bongos having a good time.
And bongos and bongs?
Probably bongos and bongs and other sorts of substances and instruments. And I could not be less interested. I could not be less interested in, I like the idea of a drum circle. I guess there are circumstances in which I could maybe be persuaded to be around a drum circle. I'm just not interested. And my husband, who was once my boyfriend, could not love anything more than a drum circle. He wants to participate. He wants to listen. He wants to dance. And I have such visceral memory of the experience of either being in our apartment or coming back from going out to lunch somewhere or just going on a walk. And all of a sudden in the background, I hear, and I went, oh no, it's going to happen. And before our relationship was really secure, it would be at first I would just go and watch him enjoy himself. And then it became kind of a point of contention where I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go to a drum circle. And and then he would want to go and we would have kind of a power struggle about it. And the moment I knew, all right, I'm in this for life, was when I would hear of a drum circle. He would get excited. We'd look at each other and I would say, you know what? You go to the drum circle. I'm going home. Take your time. I'll see you in a little bit.
Perfect.
And that was like the key to the progression of the relationship. But I think when it comes to FOMO, I don't know if it's that I'm too anxious. And so my brain overrides the anxiety and is like, just, you're not missing out on anything. Just skip it. Or if I'm psychic.
You maybe just don't have it, but let's save that for the other episode. I want to say this. Indecision leads to paralysis, and that is a real problem. And so many people will stand at that fork for much too long. And in the meantime, they build a jail for themselves. We build jails for ourselves. So the thing is, if you don't try one way or the other, you can't make a mistake, we think. But all life is a series of trial and error, right? So we're always having to make a choice and then deal with the consequences of that, but maybe make a different choice the next time. So it's tricky. There was an article that we will link to in the show notes called How to Choose the Right Path. And the bottom line, the essence of what the writer was saying is, choose the hard path because it's the one you're supposed to be on, but you avoid it out of fear of failure. What do you think of that?
That is interesting. I don't know that that's like objectively applicable, like across the board, because, but I do think that there is some truth in the fact that whatever you're avoiding often is the thing that you need to confront. I know that that's definitely been the case for me. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think that in general, that's probably a good approach. Pick the hard path, but not always. For instance, take a promotion or take time off to be with your baby. So I don't know, which is harder?
Yeah.
You know, when you, that's really tough. What is selfish, right? What is the difference between selfish and taking good care of yourself and meeting your needs and managing your life instead of doing everything for other people, but really taking care of yourself? What about leaving a high paying corporate job to go work for a nonprofit where it's going to be more mission driven, but also you're going to have to do all your own everything and
Right.
work really long hours and, you know, maybe not feel like you're being treated with the same respect. You know, I don't know. There's just a million ripples. So, you know, they talk about, the experts talk about the decision model where you like evaluate calculable benefits. So if it's a job situation, you put all these things into the mix: commute times, salaries, you know, all of that. And the key, they say, is to think about what your whole life is going to look like in each role. And this would be true for a relationship. This would be true for a move. You look at what your whole life, not just that part of your life, is going to look like. So when evaluating a job, whether to leave this job and go to that job, or leave this job for no job and just freelance or figure it out or just take some time, you have to look at not just what your work life is going to be like, but what your whole life is going to look like.
Yeah. You know, I feel like, especially now as a mom of two kids, I'm constantly making decisions. And sometimes I think, to our earlier conversation about decision fatigue, I don't have the availability or the bandwidth to have decision fatigue. So I just make decisions. And right now it comes up a lot about how I'm going to approach, in particular, like one thing that's new in our house is now that my younger daughter is taking up more space and has more opinions and is talking more and, you know, can actually play, is how I'm, whether or not I'm going to get involved when there's a conflict between them. And it's just, you know, these are not big, enormous decisions, but I am constantly at kind of a fork in the road, because on one hand, if I get involved, I can possibly dissolve the conflict, and then everything for a few minutes can be okay. If I, and this is sort of also a general, maybe more existential fork for me, because I'm trying to figure out what my methodology is to this is going to be in general. But also, I don't want to get in the way of their problem solving together. And so, but I'm facing it constantly. So it's like, yeah, a ton of tiny little decisions and one big one.
Parenthood is the hardest thing. Just the hardest thing. I want to leave everyone today with some quotes, because all different cultures have things to say about this. So this one is by F.C. Yee, who wrote The Shadow of Kyoshi. Not familiar with it, but here's the quote. If one path of a fork promised you oblivion, it didn't really matter what the other path held in store. Here's one from Neil Donald Walsh, from Conversations with God, An Uncommon Dialect. At the critical juncture in all human relationships, there's only one question. What would love do now? No other question is relevant. No other question is meaningful. No other question has any importance to your soul. They are definitely words for thought. This one is by Donna Goddard, who wrote Circles of Separation. The worst place is at the fork. You can't keep going the same direction as you came. You have to choose one or the other path. Whatever the choice, at least it is movement. Otherwise, you are just forking around getting nowhere. Love that. She had another one that I wanted to share. Think not you can return on the path that leads to the fork. Taken once, it disappears as the choice lies ahead. Both roads will lead to somewhere, but one will be to nowhere. This one by Henry Chong. When you come to a fork in the road and you're not sure whether to go left or go right, just go left. And then you'll very quickly figure out if that's the wrong way. And then you can go right. You'll still be quicker than the guy who's standing there trying to plan at the fork of the road.
I do something that really soothes me when I'm getting anxious about a decision is, despite everything that we've said, I do try to remember there are very few things in life that can't be undone. There are things that can't be undone, but there are a lot of things that if you have to, you can fix it. And I try to really hold that close to me whenever I'm feeling like I'm on the precipice of possibly just absolutely making the wrong decision.
I think that's really good advice. I'm going to leave you with one last quote from Ray Smith, who wrote The Magnolia That Bloomed Unseen. He said, Robert Frost wrote about two roads diverging in a wood and taking the one less traveled. But in Molly's case, both roads continued on to equally devastating destinations, even if the specifics were different. Which of the two paths would you choose if one went off a cliff and the other into quicksand? I would choose going off the cliff, I think, because quicksand would be very slow. Where going off the cliff, you'd have a wild ride and then boom, you're dead.
Yeah. Well, I guess, is there a chance of getting out of quicksand?
There you go, being logical again. Thanks so much for listening to All the F Words. She's Gabi Moskowitz. I am Joanne Green. You can follow us anywhere you get your podcasts.
And hang out with us on social media. We are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at allthefwordspod. You can also email us, allthefwordspod@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.